Hello out there from Rooted. We are kicking off our Native American Heritage Month workshop series, and we're really excited to be here today at the State Archives Preservation Facility with Rachel Byington, Tribal Liaison for the Wisconsin Historical Society, and Jaqueline Pozza Reisner, Curator of American Indian Collections and Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act Coordinator, who are going to share about the traditional care garden, a project our high school age rooted in urban agriculture youth employees help with this summer. We'll also be talking with maritime archaeologist Tamara Thompsen about the process of rescuing and preserving 2 dugout canoes that are currently being preserved on site. So hello, Rachel and Jackie. Could you all please introduce yourselves and your roles at the Wisconsin Historical Society to get us started?
Yeah, so my name is Rachel Byington. I'm the Tribal Liaison for the Wisconsin Historical Society. So I've been here in my position for about just a little over a year, and there's many ways I kind of work within the organization, including serving as an ambassador with some of our native state agencies to coordinate work with the Wisconsin Historical Society, also working directly with Native nations. And I think one critical part is making sure that as we are gearing up for our new building, the Wisconsin History Center that will be built on the square, is making sure that the Native nations, their stories are being told accurately and authentically where they naturally fit, and making sure that their voices are being heard in that storytelling. So that's just a little bit about what I do. There's a lot of other things, but I'm going to pass the mic over to Jackie.
And I'm Jaqueline Pozza Reisner. I'm the Curator of American Indian Collections here at the Wisconsin Historical Society, and I take care of our Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act compliance. So I have the great fortune to work with a lot of our Native Nation representatives as well, both on the Wisconsin History Center project, working on developing content and having discussions and meetings about what gets included in those galleries. I also help build the collections here. I mean, we are a historical society, but we're always collecting for the future. So building those collections to reflect today's Native communities. And I work on repatriating ancestors and items that we currently have, but are soon to be returned home.
We had just this great educational and community service experience coming to work with you all on the Traditional Care Garden project. Could you all share with us why you started this project, including why it's such an important addition to the space, and also who has been involved in this?
Great question. So the care gardens out here outside of our state archive building, we call it SAFE. They were designed in consultation with our Native partners when we were designing the space. We knew we would be doing various consultation. We knew that there was a lot of traditional care needs for ancestors and items that we currently steward. And we wanted to make sure that there was an outdoor space to hold ceremony, to just be outside, a place for reflection. And this space has been planned always since the beginning with this newer facility. It's only a few years old. But after the pandemic, some of the weeds took over a little bit, some invasive species. And we wanted the garden to be more of a welcoming place for our Indigenous guests. So that's when we partnered with our intern, Marina, that I'll pass the mic to Rachel to talk a little bit more about. But to kind of reinvigorate this area and to make it more welcoming to our Native guests.
So I'll go a little bit into explaining how this project, this area got some attention here. Earth Partnership has, my former employer has a grant that provides Native students with research opportunities. And so I approached Marina to see if she'd be interested. And I knew some of the career interests she had. So I thought it would be a good alignment. And so there was some matches with what she could do with us. And I also talked about this space that it could use some love. And so Marina was agreeable to that. Unfortunately, she can't be with us today because of her studies. But what she did is she received the grant. First of all, she applied for and received the funding. And then she designed this garden space. So she looked at plants from the Ojibwe, the Ho-Chunk and the Oneida medicinal plants that could be that were used by those nations and probably many other nations to plant in this space, looking at the sun and what else was here. And so she developed a list. That list was worked on and refined and then approved. And so it was about, with the space here, about 121 plants or so, and a lot of weeding, a lot of mulching. And that's where we invited the Rooted students to come in and help with it. So with Marina's master plan that she developed, the students were able to get all these plants in here. And so it's been a very exciting project. It's really nice. It's much more inviting than what it was when I first came here. There was just a lot of overgrown vegetation and a lot of the weeds, as Jackie has mentioned, they just kind of moved in and took over and did what they do.
Yeah.
And so we needed to kind of get it back into a shape that would be more inviting, and we can use this space.
Yeah, it really looks like a different place out here. And I know you had mentioned you'd like to thank some other people who've also been involved in the project. Who are those folks?
Yeah, so just to even get this space going, there was a lot of work with Chris Roller worked with the Department of Administration to make sure everything was, okay to do, that we were moving forward in a good way. Sam Sauer helped, coordinating a lot of the moving parts. There was lots of moving parts with getting people here, work days, making sure the watering was happening. Scott also made sure to order the supplies that we needed. There was a giant mound of mulch that was delivered to the parking lot that had to make its way from the parking lot here, and various staff folks from here, from SAFE, this building here, came out and laid down mulch, as well as there's a volunteer who helped identify the plants. Her name is Monica, and I have to say, Jackie, so committed. One day I came out here and Jackie was, I won't say what she was doing, but what I saw was sheer commitment to make sure this mulch was getting on the ground. I'm going to let Jackie, did I leave anybody else out?
No, I think that was everybody. I was out here mulching in a skirt one day. Did not plan for mulching, but it worked. Yes, our internal collections care and access staff, Sam and Scott, were instrumental. Our partnership with the Department of Administration, who oversees this building, Earth Partnership, Rooted, so many partners that have worked to get this space more welcoming for our Indigenous guests, and it just shows the commitment across the society and with our external partners to really move this work forward. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's very exciting to be a piece of this work, and our youth employees still talk about it. So we'll get them back next season to see the progress.
Good.
So I wondered if you all could take a minute to share about some of the plants that are in the traditional care garden and why those were chosen.
Some of the plants we have in here are sweetgrass, goldenrod, bee balm, coneflower, aster, lupine, pestamon, verbena, golden Alexander, prairie dropseed, Jacob's ladder, bottle brush grass, and fake sunflower. In addition to others, that's just a partial list for you there.
Thank you so much. They look like they're growing in beautifully already, and they've barely just got in the ground, it feels like. So I wondered if you all could share what have been some of the biggest successes and lessons learned so far with the project.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to say it?
I would love to. So we really learned the importance of teamwork and that no one person can do everything by themselves. So really pulling together a team has been so helpful, and just to involve the community in some, a space that we're going to be welcoming other folks into, we can take pride into. It's been really wonderful to involve more people in the project. And I think we have learned that we don't want the invasive species to come back. So we're going to have to keep committed to this space, which we are, very excited about. Our external partners would love to have you all back next summer, and just continuing to maintain this space and welcome folks into it.
Definitely. So moving forward, what is you all's vision for the future of the traditional care garden?
Great question. So now that it looks a little more presentable, bringing some more folks out here, maybe in the warmer months, but it's been cut down a little bit before the winter here, but working on some of the areas that weren't part of this summer's project, so behind the seated stone there. We'd also love to get a little more privacy in here by planting some cedars and other trees along the fence line, just so if folks are doing ceremony back here or are reflecting, they have a little more privacy. But definitely activating this space more.
Is there anything else that you all would like to share about this project or about your work with the Wisconsin Historical Society?
I guess the one thing, thinking about kind of how this happened, it happened just everything aligned just right to make it happen. But the important part is to keep it going. And I just want to express my thanks and gratitude to the folks here at SAFE who have worked really hard on various levels of detail to make sure that this garden space is a place that people can come to and visit.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. Thanks to the students who came this summer. We look forward to working with them again next year. And like Rachel said, very, very thankful to have a space. We're one of just a few organizations that have space dedicated to Indigenous traditional care, and so I'm very thankful to work at an organization where we can welcome our Native guests in such a warm way.
Thank you both so much for all the work you do, both here and in the wider community, and just for creating such a beautiful and impactful space for our community.
Thank you.
All right, so here we are with Tammy Thompsen, who is the Wisconsin Historical Society maritime archaeologist, to share with us about the process of rescuing and preserving 2 dugout canoes that are currently being preserved on site. Tammy, I would love if you could introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role.
So I am a maritime archaeologist with Wisconsin Historical. I've been here for 21 years, so yeah, a long time. And normally I work on shipwrecks. So our program is really tied to various grants that are tied to the Great Lakes. So this is kind of new and exciting for us to be able to work in some inland lakes, and then also to really be able to connect with Indigenous culture. So it's very exciting for us. So I actually ran into this dugout canoe, or these dugout canoes, while I was scuba diving. So I'm an underwater archaeologist by day, but I also just like to go scuba diving. I really like being underwater, and so on weekends I do it too. So I was out with a girlfriend. We were scootering down the wall on Lake Mendota by the village of Shorewood Hills. And where she stopped, we had a diver propulsion vehicle, so it was a big fan with a battery pack, and we were scooting down there, picking up trash, and where she stopped was over the exposed end of a dugout canoe. And this was in May of 2021. So the story kind of for these canoes starts there, but for Wisconsin Historical Society, it actually starts much sooner than that. In 2018, we had a student from the university come and volunteer for us, and he wanted to do a project. He wasn't a scuba diver, and he was interested in looking through our files and seeing what kind of small project he could do to maybe turn that into a senior thesis. So his name is Ryan Smazel, and he settled on looking at dugout canoes that were in collections across the state. So at that time we knew that there were 11 of them, but by the time he had finished his thesis project, we knew of where there were 32 of those canoes, and we had visited 26 of them. Wow. So small story on this is that Ryan he just learned how to drive a car. So asking him to go to Bayfield was like asking him to go to the moon. And so his advisor, Cecil Schrader, and I started accompanying him and going to look at all of these dugout canoes. And so because of that, we'd seen an awful lot of dugout canoes. So I think that if I had been scuba diving in 2021 and come across this and I hadn't had that contact before with all of these objects that were in collections, I would have just thought that it was a log on the bottom, but it actually is worked wood. That first canoe was 1,200 years old, and that's just wait there, right? So, and we brought that up in November of that year, working with other Native communities and in consultation, mostly with Bill Quackenbush of the Ho-Chunk. And also working with Dane County Sheriff Department. Their dive team came and helped us bring up the canoe, and that came into the conservation tank here. And then the next spring, I also teach scuba diving, so I was out with a student in June of 2022 named Casey Klaus, and we came across 2 more dugout canoes. So I'm kind of in the same vicinity, about a quarter of a mile off, but roughly the same area. And the older of the 2 is in the tank, and that one is, we call canoe number 2, a really creative name, and and that one is almost 3,000 years old. And the one that was next to it has been left in place in situ, and that one is 2,000 years old. So, and then I have another story that goes with this too, is that when we were removing canoe 2, we again brought that up, and that's in the conservation tank here. That was in September of 2022. There were 4 of us divers that were working on the bottom, and the new guys at Whitrock was in sort of this lower quadrant, and we were excavating very carefully under the canoe with trowel to try to make sure that we had, because it was so fragile, to try to get underneath, and so that we could put a lifting device underneath it. And he was going a lot slower than the rest of us, and we figured, oh, it's just because he's new. But it actually was that he was having difficulty getting underneath it. So he came up, the other divers were like, oh, we're all done, and he was like, I haven't gotten through. So Chris and I went over and we started working, and it ended up that this canoe was sitting on top of another canoe, and that one's almost 4,500 years old.
Wow.
So yeah, so there's a lot that's going on there in that little part of Lake Mendota.
Wow, that is amazing. And to think all of those canoes are just under the water.
Yeah.
You could only see if you...
So, and we left that one in place. We covered it back up. It's marked, but and we know where it is, but that one has been left, for, again, these are very fragile. Mm-hmm. So when we were bringing up the 1,200-year-old canoe, that one has the consistency of really like a bagel. So it's got a hard shell on the outside, but kind of spongy on the inside. So you had to be very careful lifting it. And I'm used to dealing with shipwrecks. This is 150-year-old wood. This is very, very different. So, and very fragile. And then 3,000-year-old canoe felt like wet cardboard.
Wow.
So it was just very, very fragile, and it almost undulated as you touched it. So you could see the water really moving through the object still. So the cellular structure is just very fragile. So that's, again, why the other canoes have now we've decided to leave them all in place.
Because they would come apart if you tried to.
They would definitely come apart. So we don't have the technology to deal with that. Plus, it takes away from the site a little bit when more and more canoes are being removed.
Yeah. So can you share about what that kind of implies about the history of the area with all of those canoes? Yeah,
it's pretty amazing that we know from the Ho-Chunk, and what they teach us is that there were people on this landscape from when the time immemorial, so forever. So they're connected to this landscape as well, and this is just proof of that, and it strengthens that proof. And what's really special is that working with Bill Quackenbush of the Ho-Chunk, he used his tribal took his tribal youth. They had a program. They received a tree from the city of Monona. It was a cottonwood tree, and they made a dugout canoe. And in that dugout canoe, they paddled the footprint of and went to places along the four lakes and all the way to the Rock River, through the Rock River, and all the way to the Illinois border with that canoe. And it was one of the most emotional experiences that I was invited to come out and tell the story of the canoe. So I came out in my boat and I sat there and they paddled up, and one woman was just driven to tears, and she said, I've heard all of my life that we've been connected to this landscape, and she said, I live just a few blocks from here, from this very spot, and this is evidence of these people being here all along. So this is just it meant so much to her, and she was just in tears, and it brought all of us to tears.
It's really powerful.
Yeah,
it's such a long history. So the canoes that you did bring up, that you were able to recover from the lake, can you tell us about the preservation process and how you all are doing that here? Yeah,
so it started almost immediately when the canoes came back. So you need to keep them wet all of the time. So we've put them, this tank was specially constructed. This is not something that you can just buy. Plus, when the canoes were being brought up, it was during COVID. So it was very difficult even to get carpenters to come and help. So this was made in-house by Jim Skibo and Scott Roller. And they made the tank based on information they had gotten from Texas A&M University, who does a lot of conservation work on ancient wood. And so they made this tank. We put the first canoe in it, and it soaked. What the process of conservation is for this is to use a substance called polyethylene glycol, and it's in this drum here. And polyethylene glycol, PEG, is kind of a waxy component, and it's actually food grade. So it's in common things like Skittles, but also in vaccines. So that's why there was such a shortage of this when the first canoe came up, and we had such difficulty getting it in. So that first canoe just sat in water, and we treated it with to try to kill some of the zebra mussels that were on it, because our lakes have invasive species. So we want to make sure that all of that was removed from it. So the water's been filtered, and then that water is changed pretty regularly. And then when the second canoe came, both of the canoes came out, not at the same time, but and they were cleaned. And so we took toothbrushes and actually toothpicks and picked all of the grains of sand out of them.
Wow.
So there's kind of this washing of these artifacts, and we had a lot of people that came to help us with that, mostly from the Native communities. So that was a very special moment. Again, one of those really, really moving experiences. And then when they went back into the tank, the next thing was introducing the PEG. So what happens is, if you think of wet wood or waterlogged wood, the cellular structure of it, the thing that's holding up the wood is actually the water that's inside the cells. So when you start drying it out, those cells collapse because the water's gone and it was holding it up. So by adding the polyethylene glycol, it's what's called a bulking agent, and it displaces the water in the cells. So it's hydrophobic, moves the water out, and then that is evaporated off the tank. And so we'll get it down to, well, as much as we can. It used to be, it's different. There's different formulations of how you do the conservation. It's about 85% of that water will be displaced, and then the canoes will be taken to a freeze dryer in Texas. So we need a large objects freeze dryer, and so there's nothing that's available locally. So they'll be moved by fine art mover down to Texas. The rest of that water will be frozen, freeze dried off of it, and then that object will be something that will be able to be displayed. It won't change shape then. So it'll have some more rigidity to it, and it'll be something that will be able to be studied.
Wow, what a process.
Yeah.
How long does something like that take?
Usually about 5 years. So our process is taking 5 years. It can be done in about 2.5. So we're hoping to have everything done and for these canoes to be ready for the opening of the new History Center in 2027.
And so once this preservation process is finished, that's where they'll go?
Yeah, that's what the plan is. So the galleries are still in flux. They're still trying to decide what objects are going to go in and what stories are going to be told. But the plan at this point is to make sure that those are, or at least one of the canoes is part of that experience.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you share a little bit with me about these pictures on the wall?
Sure, yeah. So the picture over here is really the inspiration of the tank. That's the Texas A&M tank in College Station, Texas, and they are working on a canoe in that tank to do conservation, just like we're doing here. But that is a canoe that came from, I believe, South Carolina. So, and then over here we have the recovery of canoe number 1. So mostly the Dane County Sheriff divers. In the front is Dr. Jim Skibo, and we are walking the canoe in towards shore. And then the middle picture on this is one of the cleanings of canoe number 1. So you can really see in the center of it the burning. So that's how they made the dugout canoes, is that the trees were actually felled by fire. Fire was placed around them and they dropped the tree, and then it was shaped using, again, controlled fire and scraping. So if you can imagine, this was done with stone tools or shells to scrape out the interior of the vessel. So you see that there's a hole there. That hole, we believe, is where there was a knot in the wood that just pressed through. And then the final image over on the far side of this board is the net sinkers. So there was a series of 7 rocks that were associated with canoe 1. And all of these are about the size of the palm of your hand. Some of them have natural notching to them. Other ones have been physically notched to accept the bottom part of a net. And then the top of the net would have been suspended with maybe a gourd to be able to fish. And there are very few canoes that are in the state of Wisconsin that have been found with any kind of tools with them. The other one is up at Lac de Flambeau, and that had fur trade items with it. So there were things for scraping furs and traps and that type of thing. So, and then the next picture over is Bill Quackenbush and the president of the Ho-Chunk Nation, Marlin White Eagle from the Ho-Chunk Nation. Thank you. So, and they are receiving the canoe number 2 when it came up. And then the canoe number 2 had a lot of anchor damage to it. So this area that the canoes are located in is really popular for fishing. And so when the fishermen come there, sometimes they'll drop anchors and they'll drag the bottom, not knowing what's there. And there are fine cracks and nicks in it, which have been caused by anchoring. So kind of I'm trying to work with the city to maybe create a protected area to be able to control that in the future. I mean, you can't undo damage which has been done, but you can prevent further damage from going forward. So we've talked to a couple people there, and that's moving forward. So that canoe is in fragments, but we have been told by our conservator that we can put it back together if we know where all the pieces came from. So like a big puzzle.
What an amazing project, and what an amazing discovery in connection to the past. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and for your work with the Ho-Chunk Nation on this project.
Thanks.
And
So-
we're really looking forward to also following the journey of these canoes as they finish their restoration process and end up in their new home.
Thank you. And one thing I wanted to mention too is that we are a membership organization, and if there are folks that want to support Wisconsin Historical Society, please go to our website, wisconsinhistory.org, and become a member.
Yes, and we will put that link in the comments, so you all
Thank you.
don't even have to write it down. Just click the button and support this work, and we are excited to follow the journey as we go along. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks everybody out there for tuning in. We'll see you next time.